Hello, and welcome to another episode of God-Free Bible Study here on my channel, Skepticus. I am your boy, Adam of Nola, and we'll be diving into Leviticus 16, another one of the wonderful early chapters of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, chock full of all sorts of great old-timey laws that have such a great applicability to today's life. Before I get into this, I am just going to give you one quick preamble today before we dive into the text. I was looking around on YouTube, as I often do, and because of the content that I do, of course, I end up seeing a lot of other stuff from atheists and skeptics, agnostics, whatever. And there are some videos that you can find where they are interviewing Christians on the street, and they are, first of all, they'll say, "Oh, have you heard this have you heard this verse from the Quran?" And it'll be some really horrific, old-timey, Old Testament sounding kind of verse, and the people will say, "Oh, that's horrible. That's a horrible verse." And then they'll say, "Oh, that's from the Bible. Actually, that's not from the Quran." And then you can see the wheels turning as they're trying to backtrack from what they said. Or conversely, they'll say something that they like, and then they'll say, "Oh, that's not from the Bible. That's from the Quran." And again, people get flipped up because the lesson here is that it's just about your context, your background, what you were raised in, that has an overwhelming impact on whether or not you think this stuff makes perfect sense, or whether it's horrific or nonsensical or what have you. And I bring this up because as we go through Leviticus, there's so much of this that just feels disgusting. And to be fair, there was stuff in all over Genesis that felt disgusting, and stuff all over Exodus that felt disgusting. But Leviticus is what always gets quoted when people want to bring up these horrible old laws. And yet Christians have been trained themselves to either just skim over these and forget them, or assume that, well, that doesn't apply to us anymore because it's the old law. Although they want to quote it when it's convenient for them, or they've just been brainwashed into some way of thinking that it's okay, good. But when I started this series, I wanted to do this as a plain reading, the plain English, at least as it's translated. And I didn't want to, I'm not a biblical scholar. I don't want to sit here and try to come up with you for all the context of what everyone was thinking thousands of years ago when these books were written, because for the most part, you're not going to be privy to that information when you read this text. And I want to show you I want to take you along for the ride so that you can see my reactions, and maybe hopefully you have some of the same reactions, and you can see what I'm talking about when I say that as doubters, we have the receipts. We don't have to find new places or new logical paths to try to argue against the benign goodness of Christianity or theism in general, what have you. All we have to do is read your own book. That's it. So that with that being said, we're getting into Leviticus 16. This is still following on from where Aaron's sons burned to death. Basically, according to the text, they burned to death as God just watched them burn. Now, I know that God doesn't normally intervene in such things, but it says that this happened because they brought him unholy fire, whatever that means. So this is more of that aftermath. This is Leviticus 16. It's called the Day of Atonement. And I'm just going to read through the whole chapter, and then we'll talk about some comments. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, when they drew near before the Lord and died. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell your brother Aaron not to come just at any time into the sanctuary inside the curtain before the cover that is upon the ark, or he will die. for I appear in the cloud upon the cover. Thus Aaron came into the holy place with a young bull for a purification Thus shall Aaron come into the holy place with a young bull for a purification offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He shall put on the holy linen tunic and shall have the linen undergarments next to his body. Fasten the linen sash and wear the linen turban. These are the holy vestments. He shall bathe his body in water and then put them on. He shall take from the congregation of the Israelites 2 male goats for a purification offering and 1 ram for a burnt offering. Aaron shall offer the bull as a purification offering for himself, and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. He shall take the 2 goats and set them before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Aaron shall cast lots on the 2 goats, 1 lot for the Lord and the other lot for Azazel. Aaron shall present the goat on which the lot fell for the Lord and offer it as a purification offering. But the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement over it, that it may be sent away into the wilderness to Azazel. Aaron shall present the bull as a purification offering for himself and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. He shall slaughter the bull as a purification offering for himself. He shall take a censer full of coals of fire from the altar before the Lord and 2 handfuls of crushed sweet incense, and he shall bring it inside the curtain and put the incense on the fire before the Lord, that the cloud of the incense may shroud the cover that is upon the covenant, or he will die. He shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his fingers on the front of the cover, and before the cover he shall sprinkle the blood with his finger 7 times. He shall slaughter the goat of the purification offering that is for the people, and bring its blood inside the curtain, and do with its blood as he did with the blood of the bull, sprinkling it upon the cover and before the cover. Thus he shall make atonement for the sanctuary because of the uncleanness of the Israelites, and because of their transgressions, all their sins. And so he shall do for the tent of meeting, which remains with them in the midst of their uncleanness. No one shall be in the tent of meeting from the time he enters to make atonement in the sanctuary until he comes out and has made atonement for himself and for his house and for all the assembly of Israel. Then he shall go out to the altar that is before the Lord and make atonement on its behalf, and shall take some of the blood of the bull and of the blood of the goat and put it on each of the horns of the altar. He shall sprinkle some of the blood on it with his finger 7 times and cleanse it and sanctify it from the uncleanness of the Israelites. When he has finished atoning for the holy place and the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall present the live goat. Then Aaron shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities of the Israelites and all their transgressions, all their sins, putting them on the head of the goat and sending it away into the wilderness by means of someone designated for the task. The goat shall bear on itself all the iniquities to a barren region, and the goat shall be set free in the wilderness. Then Aaron shall enter the tent of meeting, and shall take off the linen vestments that he put on when he went into the holy place, and shall leave them there. He shall bathe his body in water in a holy place, and put on his vestments. Then he shall come out and offer his burnt offering and the burnt offering of the people, making atonement for himself and for the people. The fat of the purification offering he shall turn into smoke on the altar. The one who sets the goat free for Azazel shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and afterward may come into the camp. The bull of the purification offering and the goat of the purification offering, whose blood was brought in to make atonement in the holy place, shall be taken outside the camp. Their skin and their flesh and their dung shall be consumed in fire. The one who burns them shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and afterwards may come into the camp. This shall be a statute to you forever. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall humble yourselves and shall do no work, neither the native born nor the alien who resides among you. For on this day atonement shall be made for you, to cleanse you. From all your sins you shall be clean before the Lord. It is a Sabbath of complete rest to you, and you shall humble yourselves. It is a statute forever. The priest who is anointed and consecrated as priest in his father's place shall make atonement, wearing the linen vestments, the holy vestments. He shall make atonement for the sanctuary, and he shall make atonement for the tent of meeting and for the altar, and he shall make atonement for the priests and for all the people of the assembly. This shall be an everlasting statute for you, to make atonement for the Israelites once in the year for all their sins. And Moses did as the Lord had commanded. Good Lord. That is Leviticus 16. So I wanted to get through that because there's a lot of crap there, and it's hard to really get the comments in when you're sifting through all this crap. My overall feeling for this is just that this is really so pitiful. And here's why. This is an incredibly detailed one of these lengthy explanations that goes into exactly how you're supposed to do these offerings, these sacrifices, these rituals, just like all this other incredibly detailed stuff we saw about exactly how God has to be filleted and pleased at his will. And that alone isn't necessarily bothering me because at this point it's a well-established pattern. This is what God does. But when you think about where this all came from, it starts from these specific instructions that Aaron is to follow to make atonement. For what? I mean, I literally had to look up atonement again because I thought, am I getting this definition wrong? I thought I knew what atonement meant, but no, I do know what it means. It means that you are basically making amends. You're making making up for something that you did wrong. And what did Aaron do wrong? Well, he had two sons who brought unholy fire to the Lord. And as far as I'm concerned, that atonement has happened. You burned them to death. But now Aaron has to go through this whole atonement process. And the level of detail and the amount of breath that's wasted on this just really, once again, confirms for me that this God is nothing but a self-absorbed God. It is weird and disgusting to me. We go through all this. I know that this is a one-time thing, but we're talking so much throughout this whole thing about the sacrifice of birds and goats and rams and bulls. And I always wondered to myself, like, how much livestock do they really have? I mean, they are wandering the desert. I realize that some of these things become standards for sacrifices that in theory will happen in Israel for many, many generations to come. But at this moment, they are still in the desert. How many bulls and lambs and rams and goats and all this do they have? I know like some of this would be wild, like you can go to find a wild ram, but goats and bulls, like how much of that do they really have with them? I'm sure they could find enough to do this one ritual, but it seems very short-sighted to me. And again, this whole idea that Aaron is doing all of this to atone. He's atoning because his sons were killed by God. And Aaron is atoning. For what? This just is further proof of this idea that God is all about visiting your sins upon your parents and your descendants and everything going back and forth. Like there is no idea that, you know what, that's something that they did. They need to atone for. Or in the case of his sons, they did all the atoning they need to do. They were killed. But no, now we all have to atone for him? Like, what the hell? And then they bring up this whole thing about casting lots on the goats. Basically, they're saying you have two goats, and one's going to go to the Lord, and the other's going to go to Azazel. I had not heard that name before. I had to look that up. It's a demon. It's just strange to me how they pull this up. Like, oh, look, yeah, one goes to me and one goes to Azazel. Who? What? I mean, the first time I read this, I thought that Azazel was a place. Like, they're sending the goat off to Azazel. But no, they're casting lots, basically just to randomly say which one's going to a demon and which one's going to God. Why? I don't know. I don't know what that does in God's mind, but it is mildly interesting that herein we get the term scapegoat. We've heard many sacrifices before. I don't know if there's been any mention so far in any of the previous texts about this idea that you literally put your sins on the goat. I mean, previously, there's different reasons that they do sacrifices, and usually the number one is just like it's like a tithe, it's like a tax. It's like, oh, thank you for this thing. It's thanking God, or it's giving God his portion. But usually it's not literally, I put my sins on the goat, and now the goat is sacrificed or sent to Azazel or whatever. But here is, I believe, the first reference to that. I don't remember it previously. I'm not going to go back and try to search everywhere. And, again, it says, Aaron shall present the bull as a purification offering for himself and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. First of all, they keep saying this over and over and over again. We get it. But this idea, like atoning for himself and for his house, like his whole house has to essentially apologize because you killed his sons. Okay, sure. That makes total sense. And this constant threat to kill Aaron, it just feels disgusting. I mean, he's already seen his two sons die. And God keeps talking about, if he goes into this chamber, it doesn't cover his face, he'll die. And then, the cloud of the incense may shroud the cover that is upon the covenant, or he will die. It's like, or he will die, or he will die. Okay, we get it. You've proven that you're just going to wantonly kill anyone who doesn't follow the letter of every one of your laws. Do you have to keep hammering it in? It really feels like bullying and browbeating at this point. And then this whole idea that everything has to be atoned for. And it really hammers home this idea that in this religion, it is predicated on the idea that you are broken, you are wicked, you are unclean. Like everything about you is wrong, unhealthy, unholy, deserving of unhappiness, unless God somehow makes it better for you. Because all this thing about he shall make atonement for the sanctuary because of the uncleanliness of the Israelites and because of their transgressions, all their sins. And so he shall do for the tent of the meeting, which means he's atoning for things. When he has finished atoning for the holy place and the tent of meeting and the altar, atoning for the holy place, the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall present the live goat. Like he's atoning for the things. I understand this mythological idea that the people are wrong or unclean somehow, and therefore this idea that you have to clean everything. But at some point, it just gets to be ridiculous. The idea that all of this stuff is somehow tarnished or tainted, and we have to atone for it. They don't say that you have to clean it. They say you have to atone for it as though it's done something wrong. That's just so silly and juvenile to me. But this is what God wants. This is the only thing about this whole chapter that makes more sense from a grander perspective is that he then goes on to state that this is essentially a yearly practice. He's going to make this a day of atonement that happens every year. And from that perspective, although it's not my way of thinking, I do understand that religion is often built on atoning for the inherent bad things that you've done and, appealing to God for grace and, blessings. So the fact that this is a yearly practice doesn't bother me so much as how this starts in this whole inherent blaming of Aaron and this whole idea that your tent needs to be atoned for and your altar needs to be atoned for. This is just really silly. But hey, c'est la vie. Moving on to Leviticus 17. the slaughtering of animals. So I'm going to read through this again, and then we'll comment as needed. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Speak to Aaron and his sons and to all the Israelites and say to them, this is what the Lord has commanded. If any one of the house of Israel slaughters an ox or a lamb or a goat in the camp, or slaughters it outside the camp and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to present it as an offering to the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord, he shall be held guilty of bloodshed. He has shed blood, and he shall be cut off from the people. This is in order that the Israelites may bring the sacrifices that they offer in the open field, that they may bring them to the Lord, to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and offer them as sacrifices of well-being to the Lord. The priests shall dash the blood against the altar of the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and turn the fat into smoke as a pleasing odor to the Lord, so that they may no longer offer their sacrifices for goat demons, to whom they prostitute themselves. This shall be a statute forever to them throughout their generations. And say to them further, any one of the house of Israel or of the aliens who reside among them, who offers a burnt offering or sacrifice, and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to sacrifice it to the Lord, shall be cut off from the people. Eating blood prohibited. If any one of the house of Israel or of the aliens who reside among them eats any blood, I will set my face against that person who eats blood and will cut that person off from the people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you for making atonement for your lives on the altar. For, as life, it is the blood that makes atonement. Therefore I have said to the Israelites, no person among you shall eat blood, nor shall any alien who resides among you eat blood. And any one of the Israelites or of the aliens who reside among them who hunts down an animal or bird that may be eaten shall pour out its blood and cover it with earth. For the life of every creature, its blood is its life. Therefore I have said to the Israelites, you shall not eat the blood of any creature, for the life of every creature is its blood. Whoever eats it shall be cut off. All persons, native born or alien, who eat what dies of itself or what has been torn by wild animals shall wash their clothes and bathe themselves in water and be unclean until the evening. Then they shall be clean, because you magically become clean. But if they do not wash themselves or bathe their body, they shall bear their guilt. That is Leviticus 17. So let's see. It starts off with this really weird thing, because it says, if any one of the house of Israel slaughters an ox or a lamb or a goat in the camp, or slaughters it outside the camp and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to present it as an offering to the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord, he shall be held guilty of bloodshed. That's weird, because it makes it sound like the only valid reason for slaughtering an ox or a lamb or a goat is as a sacrifice. I mean, if I'm slaughtering a lamb or a goat because I'm going to eat it, or because I'm going to tan it and use its skin, or what have you, that is not going to get burnt for the Lord. Why would I take it before the tabernacle, present it as an offering to the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord? I don't know if that means that they had to take all of them to the tabernacle, and then the priest would say, okay, you can keep this one. Taken in its literal form, it makes it sound like you can't slaughter these animals at all without them always being a sacrifice. And that is very odd to me. And then further down, this is the priest shall dash the blood against the altar, so that they may no longer offer their sacrifices for goat demons to whom they prostitute. So, to whom they prostitute themselves. I guess they can offer their sacrifices to other demons, just as long as they're not goat demons, right? I mean, if it's a bear demon or a lion demon or whatever, they can sacrifice to those. They just can't sacrifice them to goat demons. Once again, the specificity here is odd, although I believe I know where it comes from, because I believe that the goat demon aspect is once again referring to something more aligned with Canaanites. I'm not sure of that, but it's strange to me that we would say, oh, they can't, offer their sacrifices for goat demons. I also think it somewhat explains why they want everything brought into the city when they slaughter these animals, because the implication, I believe, is that those out in the countryside are more backward, less educated, and more likely to be pagans, naturists, etc., sacrificing to whatever demons they feel like. I think this is like a way to kind of control that. I'm not sure of that. I don't have any insight into that, but that is what I am kind of getting from the text. And that's why this feels very big brotherish, It's like basically saying you can't do any of this stuff on your own out in the countryside. You have to bring everything to me. You have to bring everything to the temple or to the tent of meeting, and the priests have to look over it, and everyone has to look over it. It feels very big brotherish to ensure that there's not some horrible, thing going on here. It's kind of strange. And then we get into the whole thing of blood. And we've heard this before. This basically is baked into what's considered today to be kosher or halal, if you are of Islamic background. And I bring those up together because they're very similar. And it's strange to me that there's such a prohibition against eating blood, but at no point is there even a suggestion from God that maybe you should be vegan or maybe at the least vegetarian. And don't get me wrong, this is not a moral thing. This is not a liberal, liberal lefty thing. I eat meat. I'm not vegan or vegetarian for that matter. I have no problem with it, although I do understand it can be really bad for the environment. But if your big problem is this blood, I know that there are techniques that they can do to drain the blood from meat. And there are some meats like chicken, for example, that have meat that once you prepare it seems to be very free of blood almost naturally. A chicken breast, for example, is not particularly bloody, even if you cook it right off the chicken. But ultimately, if blood is such a taboo, you cannot get all the blood out of a piece of meat. You just can't. You can't get all the blood off of a hide if you're tanning it, although I guess probably most of it would burn away because they use chemicals and things. But the point is that these are animal products. And when you have an animal product, there is going to be, at least on a very minor level, blood somewhere. I mean, if you take a chicken breast, for example, from the store, that's, in modern times, usually it's already been pre-butchered for you in this plastic package. It might look completely white, but before you cook it, leave it on the counter for a few minutes, let it sit on a plate or whatever. And you'll see it will drain some reddish fluid because there's still blood in that piece of meat. And there's nothing that you can do that's going to actually get every molecule of blood out of that meat. I don't care. But if it's such a big deal, why aren't we talking to your people more about things that would actually just keep them free of all this blood? It's like it says, all persons, native born or alien, who eat what dies of itself or what has been torn by wild animals shall wash their clothes and bathe themselves in water and be unclean until the evening. Then they shall be clean. But if they do not wash themselves or bathe their body, they shall bear their guilt. Or, you could just be vegan if it's that important to you. I mean, I know why it's not brought up, because at that time in human history, there was really no concept in this, especially in this region, of vegetarianism or veganism. I don't think anyone, I don't know this, but I don't think anyone is even considering this or practicing it, which is why it's not suggested by God, because these aren't suggestions from God. These are suggestions from the men who wrote on behalf of God. Okay, whatever. Now, we are going to get into the real fun stuff, because Leviticus 18 is sexual relations. Once again, there's so much to go through here, so I'm just going to read this through first, and then we'll cover what we need to, as on a case-by-case basis. But the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You shall not do as they do in the land of Egypt, where you lived, and you shall not do as they do in the land of Canaan, to which I am bringing you. You shall not follow their statutes. My ordinances you shall observe, and my statutes you shall keep, following them. I am the Lord your God. You shall keep my statutes and my ordinances. By doing so, one shall live. I am the Lord. None of you shall approach anyone near of kin to uncover nakedness. I am the Lord. This is going to become a theme. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father, which is the nakedness of your mother. She is your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. It is the nakedness of your father. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your sister, your father's daughter, or your mother's daughter, whether born at home or born abroad. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your son's daughter or of your daughter's daughter, for their nakedness is your own nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife's daughter, born in your father's house, since she is your sister. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's sister. She is your father's flesh. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister, for she is your mother's flesh. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's brother. That is, you shall not approach his wife. She is your aunt. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife. It is your brother's nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of a woman and her daughter, and you shall not take her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter to uncover her nakedness. They are your flesh. It is depravity. And you shall not take a woman as a rival to her sister, uncovering her nakedness while her sister is still alive. Okay, I said I'm going to finish this, but I have to just mention a few things here. First of all, I guess this means that this really disqualifies the entire state of West Virginia from any sense of Christianity. I know, low blow, right? Okay, that's crude, but man, I have to wonder when you read that whole thing, and like it goes through all these relationships and explains them in ridiculous detail. Like, in ancient Hebrew, was there no word for incest? Because almost all of these conditions that they talk about are essentially incest. I mean, some of them, like if you're screwing your aunt, I don't know if that applies as incest. I guess that is still incest. I mean, a lot of times I think of incest as like brother, sister stuff, right? Or cousins. But I think it all qualifies under incest. I mean, you could kind of just replace this whole long ass paragraph about so and so, your mother's nakedness and your father's nakedness and your brother's father's sister's nakedness and all the nakedness. You could just say, dude, don't do the incest. Like, incest is bad, okay? Incest is bad. Yeah, don't do the incest. I mean, you could have just been that simple about it. But maybe he decided to explain it in excruciating detail because maybe there's a lot of people trying to get around the letter of the law. Like, well, if he's not really my blood, but he's my mother's sister's half uncle, can I sleep with him? Like, maybe they were truly trying to cover all the bases here. The opening of this, I find this interesting because it says, you shall not do as they do in the land of Egypt where you lived, and you shall not do as they do in the land of Canaan to which I am bringing you. So a lot of what we're getting into here, and a lot of what we're about to get into is regard to specific sexual practices. I'm not saying that the Bible doesn't forbid them, but I am saying that really this isn't about so much the practices as understanding that there's this belief that this is what they do in Egypt. And there's this belief that this is what they do in Canaan. And I think the more important aspect here, if you read this fully, is not about what exact act you did. It's about, don't be like the Egyptians, don't be like the Canaanites. It's about separating yourselves, and it's about this God separating himself from the other gods. And it's about him telling his people to separate themselves from the practices of the people who worship the other gods. That's not literally what it says word for word, but that's not even me reading deeply into it. If you read this chapter, it starts with this talk about Egypt and Canaan, then it talks about the practices it forbids, and then you'll see at the end of it, it goes back to talking about essentially how they think that this poisoned the land. So with that being said, let's get back into this text because, this is all kinds of fun stuff now. You shall not approach a woman to uncover her nakedness while she is in her menstrual uncleanness. You shall not have sexual relations with your neighbor's wife and defile yourself with her. You shall not give any of your offspring to sacrifice them to Molech, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination. You shall not have sexual relations with any animal and defile yourself with it, nor shall any woman give herself to an animal to have sexual relations with it. It is perversion. Okay, we got to break this one down because there's just so much here to talk about. You know, I can't. The first thing that just smacks me in the face is that they are talking about bestiality. They're talking about at least some aspects of homosexual relationships. They're talking about child sacrifice, and they're mixing this all together. Apparently, in the eyes of God, there's no distinction between these things. They all belong right in the same paragraph. And then on top of that, they open it up by not getting with your woman because she's on the rag. Come on, man. I mean, not that I was ever going to believe what is in this text and want to follow it religiously, pun intended, but to me, it just loses so much credibility when you start the whole thing by saying you can't get with someone who is on her period. And I understand that back then, how women dealt with periods wasn't the same today, and sanitary practices weren't the same today. But to even put the idea of having sex with a woman who's on her period in the same paragraph with this other stuff just makes me say that you are really ignorant and you don't know much about how sex works. You don't know how much about how human relationships work, and you don't know much about even basic aspects of hygiene. And I'm not saying you got to go have sex on your period. I mean, there are men and women who don't like that, and that's fine if that is not your preference. But the fact that God has to lay this out here specifically, and then also puts it in the exact same category as bestiality. I mean, really, of course, he does not say that having sex on your period is equivalent to bestiality. I mean, those words are not here. But out of all this stuff, there is one paragraph that opens with not having sex with a woman in a period, and it ends with don't do bestiality. If you don't think that somehow lumps them together, then I can't help you. You just don't know how to read that well. But the fact that these are lumped all together is just mind-boggling to me. I mean, even if you wanted to make a case against homosexual relations or having sex with someone on their period or whatever, the fact that they're just all lumped in here together screams of a society and a God who don't even understand the distinctions between these things. They don't understand the basics of human hygiene and human activities, etc. It's really sad. It also shines to me a big light into the ignorance of the people writing this about sexual practices. For example, I don't think they had any idea whatsoever of kink. I'm assuming kink, at least at some level, existed because kink can't be a 21st century or a 20th century invention. Okay, what people have done in bedrooms or in tents by themselves cannot have always been this missionary style throughout history. I mean, there probably was a lot more of that back then because sex was much more perfunctory in so many cases. But the idea that they don't even mention kink, and I bring that up because you could say, well, God doesn't care about kink. Do whatever you want. I don't believe that. Seeing his attitudes here about something like having sex on your period, if that's what he thinks about having sex on your period, I can't believe that he wouldn't have had some hissy fit if he knew that somebody was getting spanked in the bedroom, or somebody was getting tied up, or somebody was into role play. Because all of that is just as apropos as having sex on your period. But there's no mention, of course, of kink in this paragraph. There's no mention of kink anywhere in the Bible. And I don't think that's an accident. I think that the people that wrote this didn't even have any true concept of human sexuality. They didn't have any concept of consensual relationships between adults. They had the only concept that they had was sex as for procreation and also as a power play. Okay, if you don't believe me on that, let's look at, and if you don't think that they were ignorant to all of these things would go on in bed, look at what they talk about with the infamous ban here on what is usually defined as a ban on homosexual relationships, but that's not what it says. It says, "You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination." Multiple thoughts here. Okay. First of all, this should make every Christian hard right, alt right kind of conservative person pretty uncomfortable about lesbianism. I don't think anyone should ever be uncomfortable about lesbianism, but I'm saying you should be uncomfortable if you've taken this position about all same-sex relationships are bad, because that is not what it says. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that they would have liked lesbian relationships. I'm saying that we can't even know what they would have thought about lesbian relationships, because they couldn't even be bothered to put it down on the page, because I don't think they ever really thought about it. Tell me somewhere in the Bible it talks about lesbian relationships. I know apologists have these ridiculous verses they can try to pull up that hint to something like this, but there is nothing in the Bible. There's not a whole lot in the Bible about homosexual relationships, about man-on-man homosexual relationships. It's only mentioned a few times. No, at no time did they explicitly talk about lesbian relationships. And there's a reason for that. It's because they just didn't get it. They didn't even think that these things were really possible. And even when we get into the idea of male and male relationships, Dan McClellan has some very interesting commentary on this. It's not just his commentary; he's citing other scholars, but there is a lot of thought out there that what this is really banning is a man taking the insertive role with another man. And if you read the text as it's written, that makes sense. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. And you might think, well, what's the difference? I mean, if two men are getting together, I mean, if one is insertive, the other is receptive. But I don't think that there was much of a concept in that time of men actually seeking out or desiring to have a receptive role in sex with another man. I think they saw it as an abomination, because it was basically asserting yourself and dominating someone in a way that they didn't think should ever have to happen. That the way that they assumed that the receiver probably never would want it to happen, because their thoughts on this were just so limited and basic and ridiculous. But I mean, the fact that this only posits the idea of two men tells us a lot about how limited their ideas were about any of this. And I know this is a given, but I'm just going to point out that there is no point in the Bible where they ever talk about the idea of consent, and what consenting people do on their own time may be their own damn business. It is always assumed that the society in general, and that God specifically, has a role in what happens in your bedroom. There's never even a suggestion that maybe you let people be people and do what they want, as long as it's consenting adults. Now, I know that may feel like a very 21st century idea, but I wouldn't expect it to find it in the Bible. But I can't even take serious any religion which holds tight to thousands years old sexual mores like this, and can't even be bothered to posit the divine response on the idea of maybe consenting adults can do as they like. It's not that he says, no, you can't do that, or it's a possibility. It's like he doesn't even cover it. And I know I'm taking these out of order, but this thing, you shall not give any of your offspring to sacrifice them to Molech, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. So I guess we can give any of our offspring to sacrifice them to any other god, just not to Moloch. Just like the shepherds out in the field can't sacrifice to goat demons, but I guess they can sacrifice to other demons. And here, when we get to child sacrifice, the most horrific of any possible sacrifice, it's not, he can't be bothered to say, you know what? Child sacrifice is bad. Don't do it. I mean, why couldn't he just say that? Oh, that's right. He can't say that because he has verses that specifically reference child sacrifice for his people. And one of the most famous and lauded stories in the Bible of Abraham is all about someone who is absolutely willing and just about to sacrifice his son in the name of God. And the fact that it didn't happen, I'm sorry, doesn't let anyone off the hook here. So he can't say, just don't do child sacrifice. That's bad. But he could. He could. Why do we have to make it about Moloch? I mean, I know why we make it about Moloch. Because again, Moloch is the Canaanite god, one of the Canaanite gods. And I know that Moloch and the Canaanites were infamous for supposedly doing a lot of child sacrifice. And that's bad. Clearly, it's really, really bad. But the fact that we can't just say child sacrifice is bad, is that so hard? Why can't we just say child sacrifice is bad? Okay. So that is all the effery of these sexual mores. But then it finishes with this paragraph. Do not defile yourselves in any of these ways, for by all these practices the nations I am casting out before you have defiled themselves. Thus the land became defiled, and I punished it for its iniquity, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. But you shall keep my statutes and my ordinances, and commit none of these abominations, either the native born or the alien who resides among you. For the inhabitants of the land, who were before you, committed all of these abominations, and the land became defiled. Otherwise, the land will vomit you out for defiling it, as it vomited out the nation that was before you. For whoever commits any of these abominations shall be cut off from their people. So keep my charge not to commit any of these abominations that were done before you, and not to defile yourselves by them. I am the Lord your God. So again, there is this superstition that the land becomes poisoned by the actions of the people. And he claims that this is why we can't do these things, because it poisons the land. But there is something really, really weird about this paragraph. And I'm going to be frank, I didn't even have this in my notes. Sometimes you read something the fifth time and you go, wait a minute. I know that things keep jumping around in a weird way, but at this point, it's very clear that they are in the desert. They have not taken over Canaan yet. They have not attacked the Canaanites or the Jebusites or any of those people, the Moabs, whatever. They are in the desert. They have escaped finally Egypt. They're not in Egypt anymore. They are not in Canaan. They are in the desert. But it says, do not defile yourselves in any of these ways, for by all these practices the nations I am casting out before you have defiled themselves. Thus, now it does say, for the nations I am casting out before you. So that implies that they're still there. But then it says, thus the land became defiled, and I punished it for its iniquity, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. But the land has not vomited out its inhabitants. As we will see not too long later in these chapters and books, the Canaanites are still there. The Jebusites are still there. I mean, everyone's still there. The Egyptians that they left, it's still full of Egyptians. Nobody has been vomited out of any land yet. And as you'll see, as it gets deeper and deeper into future books, some of these people are defeated, like the Amalekites and the Canaanites, etc. Some of them are not. Even though he promises that you're going to defeat all these people, that actually doesn't come to pass. So it's weird to me that this paragraph says, thus the land became defiled, and I punished it for its iniquity, past tense, and the land vomited out its inhabitants, past tense. That's a lie. That's just a lie. There's not any, if you go through I know I'm, getting ahead of ourselves, but if you go through the future narrative, there's nowhere that they just walked into unoccupied land. That didn't happen. They had to kill people and fight, like, as you'd expect if you want to take over someone else's land. I don't know where this whole crap comes from of this supposed, oh, I punished it for its iniquity and then the land vomited out its inhabitants. I mean, the only land that doesn't have inhabitants right now is the desert because no one wants to live there. That's not vomiting out inhabitants. So this is a weird paragraph, and it's quite frankly, it's just a lie. The only way that you could try to save this, because there's stuff throughout these books that sometimes feels out of order, but even that doesn't make a lot of sense because this is coming right after the thing with Aaron. They are still in the desert. His sons just got killed in the Day of Atonement and all this. So the idea that he's saying that these people have already been vomited out of the land doesn't make any sense, and it's factually inconsistent with anything that we've seen. So that is Leviticus 18. Of course, there's so much to hate there, but I'll tell you, obviously, the big one is all of this stuff about sexual relations and how just completely bass-ackwards the whole thing is. And for anyone who wants to hold tight to this, it does not speak well of you. And it really is a sad statement that you would look at something like this that talks about not having sex with a woman on her period and then goes to lying with a male as with a woman and saying it's an abomination and having no qualms about sticking those almost right next to each other. I mean, that just really says everything, doesn't it? And, even like the child sacrifice thing, I know that the Christians will say, well, this is just in a ban on child sacrifice, but that's not consistent with the text. It just feels like to me like this is a pissing contest with Molech, the Canaanite god. And the idea that people will use this in their identity politics and as an identity markers as a way to marginalize people based upon their sexual practices or anything else, based upon things that happen between consenting adults, that's just really gross. And they put it right next to things that can't be defended in any way, because you have sex with a woman with their period. Then you have sexual relations with your neighbor's wife. Now, I mean, that's not a good idea, although there's a whole lot of complexity that comes around adultery. And then it talks about sacrificing children. Okay, whether it's Molech or not, there's no way to justify that. And then it goes to sex with a male as with a woman. And everything here is from the man's perspective. The whole paragraph is written from the man's perspective. Because obviously, if you're a woman reading that, if it says you shall not lie with a male as with a woman, that doesn't sound like any problem at all. But it says it's an abomination. But clearly, it's from the male perspective. I mean, and then they close with bestiality. Like, come on, man, this has no credibility. And if you think it has credibility, this says far more about your character and your lack of moral fiber than it does about anything about this text. If you can seize onto something like this as a reason to other people and to hate people and to bring prejudice and social pressure against people, it says something really dark about you and about your soul. It says something dark about your whole countenance, that you could use this text full of blatantly immoral and unethical things, and then you pull out this sentence as a way to try to claim that all same-sex relationships should be banned or even punished severely, when it doesn't even say that. I mean, you'll try to make shit up, but it doesn't say anything about lesbians. Does not. And if you say it does, you are reading your own crap into the text. Like I said, even with men, I mean, if we would take this very literally, and I'm not the only one to come up with this, because like I said, biblical scholars are apparently have said this many times before. Apparently, if you're the receiver, it's okay. It's the one giving that's apparently an abomination. Now, I know that you have to have one to have the other, but I'm sad to think that the text like this is what causes so much pain in our country and our world right now. Don't be that person. Don't. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being here to the end of this video. I appreciate your attention. Any comments you want to leave, if you want to subscribe or like, all that crap, that's great. If not, that's fine too. If you hate everything I've said and you want to start a flame war in the comments, I mean, please don't, but I don't really care. To me, the text speaks for itself, and what it says isn't very flattering, but you can do with it what you want. We're going to keep chugging along, whether you want to be here for it or not. Next time we get into God-free Bible study, we'll be looking at Leviticus 19 and going on from there. But for now, thank you for joining us. I'm glad that you were here, and I hope to see you again soon.